Good afternoon and happy chocolate-covered cashew day. Welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown for Wednesday, April 21st, 2021. My name is Tom Hollingsworth, and I am someone who really does love a good chocolate-covered cashew. Joining me is my partner in crime and my co-host, Mr. Stephen Foskett. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tom. It's good to be here, but I am one who would not corrupt a perfectly good cashew and perfectly good chocolate by mixing them together. Not my thing.
Well, unfortunately, my new bold business venture is probably going to have to set this one out then. So I guess I should stick to the news thing that we do. So let's jump into some exciting things that have been going on in the world of technology over the last week. The first and foremost is thank you to Microsoft for finally patching a nasty little NTFS bug that could allow someone to create a download that could mark your hard drive as corrupted with a single click. The feature in Windows 10 preemptively marks your drives as dirty or corrupted to force you to do some kind of a disk check on them. And the way that this was working was essentially it would allow you to open a command prompt directly on the disk and write to a sector that would cause Windows to think that the disk had been corrupted and then force you to do a reboot and a check disk. The problem is, according to Microsoft, it worked just fine as soon as you did the check disk. In testing, it broke about half the drives. So Microsoft just doesn't allow you to open a command prompt at that particular area anymore. Stephen, my question for you though is, I mean, this is a feature that Microsoft implemented because we really don't want to lose data on our drives. That's like the cardinal sin of storage. But was this kind of an unintended side effect that someone kind of got lucky finding out about?
Well, let's start. Okay, first, I'm sorry. I have to put on my storage nerd hat. There, my storage nerd hat is now on. Storage nerd alert. So actually, the cool thing about this is that there's nothing wrong with it. Nothing happens. It doesn't do anything. Everything was working. It was a feature, not a bug. Anyway, essentially, Microsoft has a very flexible file system. NTFS is a very good, very flexible file system. And one of the things that you can do are some pretty advanced file system semantics. So on Unix, you can actually treat sockets as a file in the file system. Well, in NTFS, you can actually do all sorts of really cool querying and updates to the file system by just referencing special files in something called a bitmap. And essentially what was going on here was you were looking at the bitmap to see if the drive was corrupted, and it would just set the bitmap. It's a feature. It's not a bug. The problem is that I think that nobody ever said, well, if someone does that, it's going to mark this as corrupt, and then it's going to force then you're going to have to restart, and it's going to have to do a check disk, and that's bad. That's like a denial of service attack. So essentially, this was a really clever, hack, bug, whatever you want to call it, but nothing's happening. I mean, the cool thing here is, and the bottom line here is that no data was ever corrupted. And yeah, sometimes it didn't come back as clean after it did the check disk. Bad on you, Microsoft. And they probably shouldn't have let any user accessing an arbitrary file name mark a drive as corrupted. But honestly, it's just really clever and cool and nerdy. I'm glad they fixed it though still, because it was a denial of service attack. Because frankly, if anyone can cause you to have to do a check disk can take not as much time as it used to, but a little time. And that can cause your system to be offline, and that's not good. So bada bing, bada boom, it's not a bug. Okay. Speaking of not a bug, actually not speaking of not a bug, a report from 2010 states that Huawei may have been able to eavesdrop on mobile telephone conversations, including the Dutch Prime Minister. However, they couldn't understand it because it was in Dutch. This week, Dutch newspaper Die Volkskrant released details of the report and noted that over 6.5 million users could have impacted the KPN mobile network. And when asked for comment, KPN admitted the existence of the report, but noted that they had not observed the Chinese tech firm engaging in this behavior. Tom, why is a 10-year-old report making news today? And if the Chinese tech firm was engaging in this behavior, could they have observed it?
Yeah, the funny thing about this is this is a report based on a report that was filed 10 years ago and then probably put into some kind of filing cabinet somewhere in the KPN archives. And then I bet you somebody uncovered it the other day and was like, oh my goodness, cell phone providers can eavesdrop on your conversations. News at 11 and 12 and all the other times, because guess what? They can. Unless you're using a provider that encrypts calls end to end, like Apple, or you're using a method that allows that to happen through not a phone call, yeah, just do a packet dump. You'd be surprised the kind of information you can find out about this. I can remember years and years ago when cell phones were broadcasting in the clear back on the old networks. All you needed was a police scanner and you could find out some really juicy information about people. But here's the deal. Why is this 10-year-old report news now? We're starting to see a lot of very old breaches, a lot of very old persistence in networks that's suddenly becoming a big deal. Why? Well, it turns out that these things have been around for a very long time. We just didn't know about them. So like you said, if Huawei wanted to be in this network, observing data, collecting data dumps, sending packets to a collection device somewhere, we wouldn't have known about it. In fact, it was a consulting firm that did an analysis of the network and said, yeah, they have the capability of doing it. We don't know if they did or not, and we may never know if they did or not, and we may never know who they looked at. They may have just decided to grab all the packets that they could. The key is that the capability was there. Now, should we blow this into a big deal? No. Do you know why? Everybody does it. We've seen boxes installed in all kinds of fun little data centers all over the world, and if you live in a foreign country, your traffic's being routed through a collection device. Plain and simple, end of story. So what should that tell you? Don't have critical conversations on non-encrypted lines. Don't trust your provider, and maybe don't blow 10-year-old reports out of proportion. Who knows? Right. In slightly happier news, Nebulon isn't just stopping at the cloud. The vendor, which relaunched their cloud-defined storage platform last year, has moved on to encompass hyperconverged infrastructure. The storage processing unit, which was their release product, it's a PCIe add-in card. It's being combined with servers and some off-box storage to become a platform for their HCI offering, thanks to some hot little management software. Nebulon CEO Siamak Nazari, I hope I got that right, has said that customers want the cloud experience for their on-prem infrastructure. Stephen, is this a good fit for Nebulon, and are they kind of bucking against the trend of everything going to the cloud here?
Yes and no. Next story. Oh no, I'll talk about it. So Nebulon actually, I've been following this company pretty closely since they launched because, fun fact, Nebulon actually has a ton of people that I know from a company called 3PAR that was one of the real leaders in enterprise storage back in the day and was a presenter at Tech Field Day numero uno back in 2009. And Nebulon presented this stuff at Storage Field Day back in August. So if you'd like to learn more about exactly what they're doing, I do recommend checking out that presentation. Just Google Storage Field Day Nebulon, you'll find it. Anyway, the bottom line here is their SPU, or service processing unit, is essentially a DPU or a SmartNIC, like we've been hearing of from a lot of companies. In fact, like we're going to hear about in the very next story. And Nebulon, the smart thing that they did is, instead of just delivering a platform like, oh, hey, here's a smart thingy and you can put it in your server and you can do stuff on it, they actually delivered a thing that's useful. And what they delivered to start off with was essentially an enterprise storage system that spans these cards. And so you stick these cards in your servers, and bada bing, bada boom, you've got a cloud managed enterprise storage system, full featured, all the cool stuff that you want from enterprise storage right there in your system's PCIe bus, and distributed across all of your servers. Now that I've said that, you're probably like, oh, wait, that sounds like hyperconverged infrastructure. And if you're saying that, well, yeah, it kind of is. Essentially, this is sort of the next step along the path for Nebulon. And I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty interested in this. It's not a cloud. It's sort of next generation enterprise infrastructure. It brings a lot to the table, and it leverages these cards with processor offloads that we're seeing spreading everywhere. It's sort of trend compliant. Also, frankly, it reminds me a little of 3PAR. In a good way. 3PAR was one of the best enterprise storage systems out there 10 years ago. And this is, taking a lot of that stuff back into the future. So, I mean, frankly, I figured this was what they were going to do. They did it. I like it. It's cool. And I guess the gist of it is, instead of just delivering a DPU, Nebulon is actually doing something with a DPU that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And quite honestly, any kind of application of DPUs is going to be a massive win, because right now they are the forefront of technology, but they've got to get out into the world. One more story for you, Stephen, and it's concerning one of your favorite topics, AI. Xilinx is adding a little bit more power to their impressive lineup of chips. They recently announced Kria, which is a new solution aimed at providing resources for AI computing at the edge. The new offering is a small form factor that is specifically designed for smaller devices that live on the edge. The idea is that this embedded chip package will be able to be installed in devices that can be rapidly deployed in order to quickly ramp up AI capabilities at a given organization. Now, a lot of the experts are saying that Kria is specifically designed to combat the GPU enabled AI solutions that are coming from NVIDIA. That makes a whole lot of sense considering who the new parent company of Xilinx is. That would be AMD, the perpetual thorn in the side of NVIDIA. Stephen, does this mean that the future of Xilinx is going to be in these very specific application chips, like AI focused things, or is this part of a larger play to integrate into a lot of AMD's future plans?
So when we say Xilinx, we mean FPGA. I mean, this is basically the other big FPGA company. Intel, of course, is the bought their big competitor, and that's their the Intel FPGA line. When AMD announced that they were going to be acquiring Xilinx, and I should point out that this hasn't gone through yet. The deal is not done. It's in that sort of nether world between announced and closed. But that being said, a lot of people were a little bit scratching their heads like, okay, that's great, but what are FPGAs for anyway? I mean, essentially, the bottom line here is you've got a chip that you can dynamically reprogram to do different tasks. And as you can imagine, that's really cool, but also kind of head scratching, because it's great to have a chip that you can reprogram to do different tasks, but what are you going to do with it? And to me, that's the interesting thing here. So let's take you back a few years to NVIDIA's GTC, when they announced the Jetson cards. These were kind of Raspberry Pi-like little cards. I actually have one right here. And they included an NVIDIA GPU core. NVIDIA released these things kind of to seed the market in hopes that people would find some use other than graphics processing for GPUs. And what happened was, well, they did. They made these things cheap. They made them widely available. They're low power. You can kind of do stuff with them. And NVIDIA also released a bunch of software to go along with it to encourage people to try it out and play with it and get it into production. And that's pretty much what happened. So over the years, they released new Jetsons that have enabled new features and have new GPUs. And that's pretty much what Xilinx is doing here. I love the idea. Essentially, this is a Xilinx Jetson or a Xilinx Raspberry Pi, and it's got an ARM chip on it and an FPGA on it. So instead of teaching people to use GPUs for AI, for example, you can now get involved in using FPGAs for AI. And frankly, that's a kind of a cool application for this stuff. One of the challenges to a lot of AI applications is that essentially, once the chip architecture has been determined and rolled out, you're basically stuck with that because it's fixed. So for example, those original NVIDIA Jetsons are useless now because frankly, the version of CUDA that they support is too old. It's 32-bit instead of 64-bit, and nobody uses it. And so basically they're e-waste. Well, FPGAs are kind of never e-waste because the thing is you can reprogram the thing to do new stuff. And that's pretty much what's happening here. So Xilinx has a magical little experimental board with an FPGA that can do cool processing tricks. Among the cool processing tricks is AI. And I think that that's the important thing to know here, is that it's not just about the chips. It's also about the supporting software. And so, in addition to delivering the AI platform, the hardware platform with the FPGA on it, they're delivering software that's going to help people use this platform to do cool stuff. And frankly, this is going to be a really big enabler for them going forward. Because again, one of the challenges with FPGAs is, what am I going to do with it? Well, now you've got a board that you can afford. I think these things sell for a couple $100, and a processing, programming environment, software environment that goes with it. You've got a software development tool. You can put, PyTorch and TensorFlow and experiment with things. And when you find something you like, then you can kind of step up to the real version or the pro version. So honestly, this is pretty exciting. I love that they're doing it. And frankly, it's in line again with what other competitors are doing. So, Intel has some supporting software for their FPGAs, but they don't have a little Raspberry Pi-like device like this thing to give it a shot. NVIDIA has software that goes along with their GPUs, and people are using them. So I think that same's going to happen here, and I love it. And also, I will point out that Xilinx, surprise, is presenting at Tech Field Day. So if you would like to learn more about Xilinx and what they're doing, I can't say 100% that they're presenting this product, but tomorrow, Thursday, April 22nd at 11 a.m. Pacific time, we're going to be live streaming with Xilinx. And maybe if you're interested in this, you can ask a question, or at least you can tune in. You can watch the recordings on our YouTube channel and learn more about this product, or at least about FPGAs in general.
All right. Well, I will definitely want to make sure that we tune in for that. Got a couple stories that we wanted to do a little bit more focused deep dive on. So let's just dive right in, because that seems to be what Dell wanted to do last week, right after we got the rundown published, because they absolutely shocked the market after close by announcing something we knew was coming all along. They're going to spin off their share of VMware to help pay off some of that mountain of corporate debt that Michael Dell and Silver Lake Capital have accrued. While we're not financial analysts, please remember that, we think that these are two very important companies in the enterprise IT space. So what should people like us, meaning practitioners and things like that, make of this big announcement? And what things are going to change? Or is this really just a clever financial maneuver at the end of the day?
I'm going to go with clever financial maneuver for 500, please, Alex. This is the kind of thing that we expect from Michael Dell, isn't it? Let's come up with a clever financial move. Let's do something different here. As you know, EMC bought VMware like a decade ago in one of the most smartest and biggest payoff corporate acquisitions of all time. And they have obviously grown to become one of the most important companies in IT. VMware essentially is the enterprise hybrid cloud. And any company that's not using VMware is kind of a head scratcher at this point. And frankly, that has been a serious asset for EMC first, and then for Dell EMC and Dell Technologies, the global sort of parent company, for a long time, because it's a golden goose. I mean, VMware is a very profitable company with very good margins, very low debt, very smart people, lots of customers. I mean, everything you want in a big, fancy, company. Dell itself, on the other hand, is a very different company. As you probably could guess, Dell Technologies makes a lot of money selling atoms instead of bits. They sell storage and servers and networking and laptops and all sorts of stuff. And frankly, those two things kind of don't go together very well from a businessy, financially, analysty, stock markety kind of thing. And this was kind of the problem here. So Dell Technologies had a ton of debt, and the amount of debt that they had meant that they couldn't get the highest debt ratings, which meant that it was more expensive for them to borrow money. At the same time, they're making a ton of money. They're making money hand over fist, but it didn't look as good as it should have from a software company perspective, simply because they've got, this other business that is just a really different kind of business attached to it. This transaction basically breaks that knot and allows VMware to be judged as VMware in the stock market, Dell Technologies to be judged as Dell Technologies in the stock market, and as a side effect, helps to pay off some of the debt that was accrued by Dell Technologies over the years. Frankly, again, I'm not a financial analyst, but this is going to help both sides of the equation tremendously. So Dell will be able to borrow money at a nice high, debt rating. In other words, they'll have to pay less interest on the money that they borrow, and that'll help them. Frankly, they'll be able to be judged as Dell Technologies instead of as the daddy who owns VMware in the stock market, which will allow them theoretically to grow and expand and fly on that side. VMware will be judged as a software company, an enterprise software and services company, like they should be judged. They also will be able to kind of unlock additional borrowing opportunities because their finances kind of aren't connected anymore to the parent company. And frankly, VMware will be able to pay off the debt that they're incurring in order to make this transaction happen. It all makes sense. It's all very logical. And frankly, nothing will change because the bottom line is Michael Dell is still going to be the chairman of the board for VMware and for Dell Technologies. And going forward, these two companies will still work together. They won't be the same company anymore, but they'll be two companies that work together and have the same chairman and have the same direction and are kind of aligned in corporate wise. And everything makes sense about this deal. Even investors benefit because they're going to get a dividend from VMware and they're going to get some stock. So frankly, I don't have a lot to say, and enterprise IT practitioners shouldn't be concerned. They shouldn't even really care.
Yeah, we've debated this a lot, and if you go back on gestaltit.com, I mean, we found that episode 8 of Checksum was about what's going to happen. Is Dell going to sell VMware? We just recently recorded a podcast that published about a month and a half ago. What is the fate of VMware now that Pat Gelsinger is gone? And I believe that at least one of us on that podcast mentioned this very outcome is they're going to spin it off and turn it into something else. But the key here, like you said, is I've always described the whole weird Dell EMC, Dell Technologies, VMware relationship like two divorced people that get together again, but they have like that stepchild that's kind of on their own and like, listen, you're good for my mom and I really appreciate that, but I am never going to call you dad. Well, now that kid's going off to college and it's like, listen, I'm independent and I can take care of myself and I don't need you unless you're willing to send me $50 for rent this week. And dad's still like, you know what? You go get him, champ. You do know what he's up to, right? You do know what's going on. Michael Dell is never going to let go of VMware. And do you know why? And I say this with all of the positive feelings in my heart. Michael Dell is not an idiot. Michael Dell is a smart, capable businessman who looked at the investment that he got with Dell Technologies and all of the EMC Federation, and he said, that's my crown jewel. If I can find a way to leverage that to turn it into something bigger and better down the road to help me with all of the other things that are going on, then yeah, I'll go ahead and spin it off. So Michael, first, if you're watching this, please do not hit me with a bolt of lightning because I said you were not an idiot. You are very smart and very shrewd, and I think that this is going to end up being a great move in the long run. Now, of course, we're all freaking out because what does this mean? Well, give it till the end of the year before you really decide, because honestly, this move can't happen before September because that's when all of the options and all of the strings on this whole thing finally expire. But look at the way that everybody else judges this, because the smart money, I think, is going to say that this, just like Stephen said, this is business as usual. Nothing's going to change. The sky is not falling. We're unlocking a little bit of value out of VMware. We're paying off a little bit of debt for Dell. Makes things a little bit easier in the transition in the long term. 3 years from now, we won't even know that anything has really gone on, other than the paperwork will have somebody else's name on it. That's really about all there is to it.
Yep. Yeah, in your metaphor, I mean, it's like a married couple where the husband had bad credit and the wife has great credit, and that's kind of holding the couple down. Essentially by getting this divorce, it's going to help both of them long term. The only concern that I have, honestly, about this is that, long term, well, first, Michael Dell is not immortal. Also, no lightning bolts. Theoretically, he may not want to be the chairman of VMware forever. And when he's not, theoretically, VMware is free to go their own way. Similarly, we could see activist shareholders get involved on the VMware side, and maybe that changes things. And furthermore, some of the financial people that I do know are wondering if this was the best deal financially that could come out of this. But again, I'm not really qualified to answer that question. I'll just say that, frankly, I'm gonna put my faith in Michael Dell, and his financial people probably got the best deal out of this that they could have, given the reality of the market today. So Tom, let's turn the page back to the security side here, to a really weird story. The Department of Justice revealed that the FBI got into the patch game over the last few weeks. The law enforcement agency logged onto vulnerable Microsoft Exchange servers and implemented a workaround to prevent systems from being exploited by a series of vulnerabilities that were released earlier in the year. This is something that would normally be lauded, but privacy advocates are worried about the optics behind a government law enforcement agency gaining access to private servers under any circumstances without a warrant. And even with a warrant, is this what a warrant is supposed to be for? Tom, I know that there's good intentions here, but should we be worried about this, that the FBI is like monkeying around with people's Exchange servers?
There's a lot to unpack in this story. When I first saw it pop up on the news feed, my first thought was, that can't be right. This has got to be a joke. And then I dug into it. And yes, in case you were curious, the Federal Bureau of Investigation really is logging into people's servers and removing the exploit scripts that would allow people to remotely take them over. Okay, in theory, that's great. Let me change it. The KGB is logging into your email server and patching exploits. The CIA is logging into your server. Now suddenly do you start getting the little creepy crawlies up the back of your spine? Okay, I get that they have the best of intentions, but they are the last group that should be doing this. Anybody else should be doing this. The GAO, the FAA, the FFA, anybody else, because when the FBI comes knocking at your door, I mean, there's only one thing more horrifying in the world of security, and that's Brian Krebs is on the line asking for a comment. But yeah, you don't want the FBI monkeying around in there, because here's the deal. This time, we'll let you get away with it, but now you've set a precedent. So the next time they come knocking around your email server, oh, we're fixing an exploit. And by the way, we're going to install this old tool that'll keep it from happening again. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Now you told them they could do it last time. So first of all, patch your damn Exchange servers. Don't let the FBI do it for you. But second of all, somebody needs to do an investigation into this and find out who authorized it, because the feds don't do things without a paper trail. So we need to figure out what happened. We need to get a scope of the whole thing, and we need to make sure that they understand that don't ever do this again without permission. And I'm not anti-law enforcement by any stretch of the imagination. I'm anti don't monkey around in places you're not supposed to be if you could be sued for it. And that's what's going to happen, because now, let's just say for the sake of argument that one of these companies ends up coming under a federal indictment for breaking the law or something. Well, if the FBI got into their Exchange server and started doing stuff 2-3 years ago, any lawyer worth their salt is going to go back to that and go, well, they collected all that evidence illegally and we should have it all thrown out of court. You're opening yourself up to a world of problems just by trying to be the good guys.
It's one of those things, I don't know, a lot of us in the tech space end up being Kevin, the Wi-Fi guy for our in-laws or our neighbors or people that we know from town or school. And frankly, my rule on that is always kind of, you break it, you bought it. In other words, you fix it, you bought it. If your grandma wants you to fix her computer, by all means, fix her computer. But just understand that the next time something goes wrong, she's going to ask you to fix it again. And the time after that, she's going to ask you to fix it again. And then she's going to ask you to help with this and that because you're the computer guy. Does the FBI really want to be the computer guy for everyone in the United States? I think not. I mean, frankly, I'll just say this right now. I'm not naive, but I kind of trust that the FBI was doing the right thing with these servers. I really do. And frankly, I trust that their heart was in the right place when they're like, we should fix that stuff. But I do see a bit of a slippery slope here. I mean, can you imagine if, the police in your town discovered a flaw in, all like General Motors car door locks? And so they went around and looked in people's driveways to see who has a GM car, and like got in there and like got under the hood and was like, we'll just adjust this here and fix that there, and that'll take care of that flaw. Would you really feel comfortable with that? Even if you trust them, even if you're like 100% on board, even if you know and can verify that they did the right thing, is this really their job? And another question that I've got too is it possible that a court gave a warrant that said not collect data from these suspects, but go to these uninvolved environments and fix something? Like, is that even legal? Is that like a thing that a court can do? Is that what a warrant is for? I mean, I just don't know. And so yeah, I don't want to be all like, oh, they never should have done this. It's terrible, don't trust the man. But on the other hand, I'm kind of like what even happened here? Nothing about this story makes sense to me. And I don't suspect that it's going to make any sense as it gets even more clear.
Yeah, I would agree, Stephen. That's I don't think we've heard the last of this, but there is one thing that does make sense, and that's the Gestalt IT rundown, which you can watch every Wednesday at 12:30 Eastern time here on our YouTube channel. You can also catch the show notes. We'll publish those shortly thereafter, along with the recording. Stephen, you've got a busy week. What are you up to?
Thanks a lot, Tom. Yes, indeed, I do have a busy week. This is Tech Field Day week. Now, many of you know that Gestalt IT produces the Tech Field Day event series, and we get together a team of a dozen nerds like us to listen to companies and ask them questions and discuss their technologies and their products and post the whole thing on YouTube. That's a thing we do. That's kind of where our money comes from as a company. This is actually Tech Field Day. So this is our general purpose, all topics, all singing, all dancing Tech Field Day this week. And, we kicked things off this morning with Riverbed, a brand new company called Vicinity that's never been presented before. And Micron Technology is going to be presenting actually shortly after you are able to view this Wednesday afternoon. Tomorrow, we're going to hear from Hazelcast and Xilinx, as I mentioned. And then Friday, we've got Blue Cat and Pure Storage presenting. So we would love if you tuned into those. You can just go to techfieldday.com. Or, of course, you can see videos of these presentations. Just go to youtube.com/techfieldday. And while you're there, you can look up some of the companies we've referenced here, and you can see Tech Field Day presentations from other topics as well. So that's what I've got going on. It's been exciting. It's a lot to do. We are also doing a special Tech Field Day presentation on Tuesday. Just go to techfieldday.com and learn a little bit more about that. That's a presentation with Scality and HPE. And it's going to be real short, easy to digest. Put that on your calendar. We'd love to see you there.
Yep. And if you want to learn a little bit more about some of the other things we mentioned in this episode, like the Checksum video series or our on-premise IT roundtable, head over to gestaltit.com if you're not already there, and look up some of the information, because it turns out we're really good at predicting the future, especially when everybody knows what it's going to look like anyway. But for now, for Stephen Foskett and for Tom Hollingsworth, we want to thank you for tuning in for this episode of The Rundown. Stay tuned for more great news headed your way next week. And remember to have a really awesome day today.